So I know you're watching this because you want to be able to do something like this, so let's not waste any time and just jump right into this. We're going to be making this environment a cabin in the middle of the woods. I'm going to be showing you how to model the cabin, model the grass, and yeah, create the scene. I started by gathering a lot of reference images, and I mean a lot. As you can see here from my PureRef are some of the reference images I was trying to use, and I also used them to get a general idea of the colors I want to achieve in the render, and you can see how the cabin looks after texturing. I also made sure that the interior was also done because I wanted to be able to use this in Blender and Unreal Engine. I'm using PBR textures that can easily work in Unreal, so this can be used as a low poly asset in something like Unreal Engine or Unity. So the first thing I started with, it was set up by environment and create the cabin. I use a character here just to understand the scale of my scene. Extruded the roof. To make the side walls, I created a plane and then extruded it. I also made sure that I UV unwrap it before I duplicate it into other planks because I don't have to then UV unwrap each plank individually, since the original one was already UV unwrapped, and that saves me a lot of time. Then I added the displacement texture to kind of make the wood more organic, give them a bit of distortion to make it more realistic. Then I just duplicated that wall, edited it to fit that side, and then just made the four walls of that make up the cabin. And you can see I'm trying to make sure that every piece is UV unwrapped before I duplicate it, so that I don't have to do it for the duplicated piece. As long as the original is UV unwrapped, then it's much easier for me. It helps me save time because I don't have to do the same step for the duplicated version. You can see before I even duplicated this beam here or pillar, I made sure to UV unwrap it and then duplicate it so that the duplicated version also has UVs, and I don't have to do it again. If I didn't do that, then I would have to go back and UV unwrap all the four sides or all the four pillars. I used the same pillar for the to make the window, and since that pillar was also already UV unwrapped, I don't have to worry about UV unwrapping this again. And since I'm going to be using Substance Painter to texture this, it's very important that you have your UV maps ready and set up. So I'm making sure that before I duplicate anything, I have it UV unwrapped. And the window is very simple. You're just moving pieces around based on what you imagine a window would look like. And this is my imagination. I'm looking at my reference images. I'm not just making things up in my head. I'm looking at the reference images here. You can see them on the side of the screen there. It's a lot of references, so I'm always zooming into different images to see how those windows look. I'm not just using one reference image. I'm trying to get pieces I like from different images, and then making them turning them into a different image of mine. So I knew that I wanted a curtain behind the window. This is what I'm making here. Just a simple extrusion and then pushing it down, and this will help me add some variation in the windows, because I'm going to be duplicating this window to use in a different area. I want one to have curtains and another one not to have curtains. Again, you can see me UV unwrap the window before I duplicate it, because if I don't, I will have to UV unwrap the duplicated version as well. So if the original is UV unwrapped, I don't have to worry about UV unwrapping the duplicate because I've already done it on the original one. So I used booleans to cut a hole for the window in the wooden wall. And I set it up using a collection. So all the mesh, I'm just using a mesh collection as the UV object, so that I don't have to make multiple modifiers for the boolean. So I'm just using one modifier for the window cutouts, and just using a collection of cubes to make those cutouts. I'm also using the same windows as the door. I'm making a few slight changes, and you can see I'm trying to remove some of the resolution that is not needed, but I'm adding a little bit of detail. The resolution or the vertices that we are adding there are there so that we can add a slight displacement in the doors, so the door columns don't appear too straight. So because this is a cabin, I wanted to go for a kind of used cabin, not brand new, where everything is still straight and very clean. So that's why you see I'm adding a slight displacement in the window frames and the door frames there. So here I'm making the actual door itself by just extruding these pieces together, and you can see I already now have a frame. Now the next part is to make the actual window frame, and you can see I'm always making sure that I have things UV unwrapped, because this is the stage you want to start UV unwrapping. Most people wait until they have modeled everything, but you end up doing a lot of work if you try to wait until the final stage of the model to UV unwrap. I always try to keep the modeling and UV unwrapping unwrapping stage, basically do the UV unwrapping while modeling, instead of making the UV unwrapping stage separate from the modeling stage, because then it's much easier for me to UV unwrap, because most of the time you end up using the same pieces, and if you have those pieces UV unwrapped, then you don't have to worry about UV unwrapping them when you have duplicated them. So yeah, this is me creating a window frame, and that's going to hold the actual glass piece, and yeah, it's just extruding a few pieces together, and then turning them into an actual window. So I'm using the shear tool to kind of make the edges slant a bit so that they can match in the corners very clearly there. Now we have our door nearly done. We're just left with the glasses, and I'm always going back to the UV unwrapping, because I'm keeping the UV unwrapping stage within the modeling stage, so that they're not separated for the same reasons that I've already mentioned. And here we have our glass piece, and we have our window done. I'll take this moment to promote my add-ons, like the asset library here that I'm using to collect some of the assets that I've already used before, and I'll also be adding this door and the cabin into my library so that I can use it in the future for future projects. This asset library is like the asset browser in Blender, but the difference between the asset library and the asset browser is that this is in a compacted form, and you have all your assets in one place. So you don't really always have to add things into the library before you use them, like the asset browser works. This one, you add them once and you can just search them. You can just search them for any project, and you would be done, like you're seeing here. Like what I did for the knob, I added that I think years ago, and now I'm just searching it in search. I just search for it, and it's added to the library. All links are going to be in the description, including the project files if you're a Patreon or a YouTube member. So I wanted to add an extra room for this cabin, so I did that here. Just using a few duplicates, just duplicating the walls and the base or the concrete base of the cabin, and just making it and turning it into a room. Okay, now that we are done with the walls, we can go onto the roof, and the roof is just going to be a duplicate of the wall faces or mesh, and I'm going to be using this mesh here as the boolean cutout for the roof here, and I'm using the intersect option to get an intersection of the wooden planks from the intersection between the wooden planks and that triangular mesh. Triangular mesh, as you can see there. And yeah, so I'm just also duplicating this to be on the other side, and this is semi-procedure because if you edit the triangular mesh, it also updates the shape of the roof. If you want a more slanted roof, you can just adjust the height of the triangle and you get that. Then I apply the displacement, I apply the boolean because I knew I wanted to UV unwrap this, make my life much easier. I hate using booleans a lot, so whenever I get a chance to get rid of them, I get rid of them very fast because they can usually also slow down everything. So I knew I wanted to have a thatched house. This is just a house with grass on as its roof, but I also wanted it to, because just using the thatched house, just using grass for the roof is a bit hard. You would need a lot of meshes to get it to look realistic. So instead of using meshes, actual grass meshes, I opted to use a grass texture, or a grass texture for this, and I'm going to be adding that onto a surface like this, a mesh like this, and then instance that onto the roof with geometry nodes. You'll see in a moment. And I'm adding in a slight angle to this because I want this to be these grass objects to be on top of each other, like overlaying or overlapping each other a bit. So here I'm using geometry nodes, and the geometry nodes is going to be, these instances are going to be instanced onto this plane. So I'm just setting up a geometry node setup using the plane, the grass object as our instance, and then the plane as our instancer, just using a distribute on points, distribute points on faces, and then instance on points. Basically, it's something we have done several times. As you can see, I'm just adjusting the angle a bit and randomizing the rotation, randomizing the scale, so that we have so that things look more organic as like that. So there's several ways you can operate this, but I went with this because I knew it would be the most efficient, and I can just layer different layers of this instance to make the grass look more thicker. So yeah, I'm still going in and adjusting the shape of the grass a bit. After that, I realized the instances and converted them into a mesh because I wanted to do the texturing in Substance Painter, and it would work better. It doesn't really support geometry nodes, so you'd have to apply this as a mesh and export it as a mesh for it to work. I duplicated this for the smaller room, and yeah, I think I was done for the roof, and now it was just adding more decorations, like adding these side slanting beams to make the roof look more supported, and hence making it look more realistic. Again, using the original beams we were using, they're already UV unwrapped, so I don't have to UV unwrap them again. That saves me a lot of time. And yeah, for projects like this, this is a large project, so you want to be very careful how you manage time. Otherwise, you won't finish it in time, or you will get tired of the project before you can get it to a level where it's actually done. So any shortcuts you can take, make sure you take them so that you are more efficient. I realized that I didn't have a way into the other room, so I added a boolean object, a boolean cutout for that, so that I can add a window on there, and I also created a chimney. And I wanted the chimney to be a bit detailed, so I created these brick walls, or I created a brick wall for that by just creating a brick and then just duplicating it around into a brick pattern, and that became my chimney. As you can see, just creating a bunch of bricks and then just duplicating them around into a brick pattern. And I also again made sure to UV unwrap this, because if I didn't, I would have to UV unwrap each brick individually if I didn't unwrap it before I duplicated it, and you'll see you see me here going back in and trying to UV unwrap each, because I changed the UVs after I unwrapped, after I duplicated the bricks, so I had to go back in and adjust the UVs again, which was a bummer, but it wasn't a lot of bricks, so I was able to do that. I actually first deleted half of the walls so that I don't have a lot of bricks to UV unwrap, and then I just duplicated the bricks again. I think I used copy UVs to meshes, so that I don't have to UV unwrap all the bricks. There were more than, I think, 50 bricks here, so trying to UV unwrap them individually would just be too much work. Yeah, I think we are at a level where we have our cabin almost done. We're just adding in a few extra details just to make the cabin look a bit more polished and well supported, as you can see there. Now it is important you check your normals to make sure that they are non-flipped, especially if you're going to work in a different application like Substance Painter, or even export your models into something like Unreal Engine or Unity, because they take because UV and the normals are used to set up the shaders, and sometimes you will end up with a mesh that doesn't look proper because your normals are flipped. So here I was making sure that my UVs were correct and my normals were looking correct as well. Next stage was to set up materials, and here I'm just making the chimney. Turning it into a fireplace, as you can see here. Just a small afterthought details there that I think could also help the model a bit. Okay, now it was time to jump into Substance Painter. Substance Painter, you just export the model as a mesh, as an FBX mesh, and I also made sure that each part of the mesh had a separate material, so the walls were separated from the roof with a different material, so that in Substance Painter I can easily hide the walls from the roof and focus on the walls only. I'm just adding a wood material onto this and making my own adjustments. I'm not going to go through a step-by-step tutorial on how to use Substance Painter, but it's a very, very important software, especially if you want to go into if you want to make this a profession. You want to understand how Substance Painter works, because I think it's the industry standard for texturing. It really speeds up things quite a lot. If I try to texture this in Blender, it would take a lot of time, and if I wanted to export the model into Unreal or Unity with PBR textures, baking textures in, I wouldn't recommend anyone to bake textures in Blender. It takes a lot of work to set up the texturing, and it never ends up looking as good as you want to. So instead of going into using Blender for creating textures, especially if you want to share your models with people who are going to use the model in a different application, I would recommend you use Substance Painter to do the texturing. I can see it does things a lot easier. I can see I wanted to make the ground, the wood a bit dirty. It has this ground dirt texture. And actually, instead of using ground texture, I made this look like algae. Yeah, so the Substance Painter is a really, really powerful tool, and I would recommend you guys to learn it. And here I'm trying to add some water damage. It has these brushes that you can paint, that you can use to paint like water drain. yeah, we're just adding details and details like this very easily. Something that would take a lot of time to set up in Blender, you can easily do in Substance Painter in a few minutes. Substance Painter has a lot of great masks. It has an edge mask, a dark mask, ground mask, a lot of masks that I think, I don't know, there was a talk about updating Blender texturing tools a few years ago, but I don't know what really happened with that, because I think Blender is really lacking in that area. You have to do a lot to set up anything. Compared to Substance Painter, Blender is way behind, like years and years behind. I guess it makes sense because Substance Painter is a dedicated texturing software, and Blender is an all-you-can-eat package. So anything you want to do, you can use Blender. But yeah, when it comes to texturing, I do recommend you use something like a dedicated texturing software. You will not regret it. It will save you a lot of time. But if you want, you can still use Substance Paint. You can still use Blender for texturing. I have a full course, a free course on YouTube that you can check out to do the same thing I'm doing here in Substance Painter. It will take you a little bit more time to set up, but you can still do the texturing in Blender. And I'll be leaving a link to my texturing course, free on YouTube. I think the course was done in Blender 2.8, I think, but it's still the same knowledge applies to Blender 3. There isn't anything new that you have to worry about. So here I was creating curtains, and I just used a mask, a cloth texture to add as cloth decorations or wrinkles in the curtains. Just to add a little bit of detail in the window. And I knew I wanted to duplicate this window to use it in a different spot. So I'll just duplicate the window and make sure the duplicated version does not have the curtains, so that we have some variation. So one area has curtains and another doesn't have, and you can see it adds some good detail in there in the cabin, makes it look more interesting. Yeah. So I knew I also wanted a concrete base, so I added that. I think I skipped ahead from this because it was just repeating the same things, the same step, nothing new. Then I added this rock PBR texture that I got from cc0textures.com. I think now it's called ambient textures. I'll be adding a link to where you can download. I have a post on Blender Everything, which is my website, that shows you different resources you can use for textures, for free models, everything. I'll be leaving links in the description to get you to show you where you can download some of the resources I'm using here for free. Yeah, I thought this rock looked good here, but it just seemed too perfect for the base there. So I ended up just switching it to a concrete and using the rock for the chimney, and just adjusting it a bit to make it more to fit the cabin a bit better. I think adjusted the colors a bit, and I was happy with that. Now the next step I think was creating the glass. I changed the shader to PBR alpha blending, so that I can take advantage of opacity. The original the default one doesn't, in Substance Painter, doesn't support opacity, so you have to change it to PBR with alpha blending to support alpha blending, which we needed for the glass windows. And the glass were a different material. Also needed a mask for the dirt, and this is where Substance Painter is really powerful. Its ability to create masks, and you can see with just a few clicks I already have a mask set up. That kind of tells me where the dirt is going to settle, and I'm using a red and blue colors here just to visibly see, to easily see where that mask is being applied. And now I'm just using that mask for the dirt, and yeah, also using it to adjust the roughness of the texture, and you can see how that looks. There was a normal map in the glass, so I disabled that so that because it looked a bit weird with the normal mask, with the normal map. But here I think yeah, it looked good. Again, I can't stress this any further, but trying to achieve these sort of results using Blender is a bit hard. It's quite a lot of work. You have to do a lot of work. I also wanted to adjust to make the frames stand out a bit, so I added some color to them, just a slight red that I liked in one of my reference images I was looking at, and so I added that by just creating another mask and selecting the frames of the windows and just giving them that red tint. And yeah, it was time to go to the roof, to the thatched grass roof. Okay, now for the grass roof, I knew I wanted to use a noise texture to add in these details to make it look like grass. And again, you have to make sure that you're using alpha blending, because this noise is going to be used to drive the alpha mask for our grass to make it more like grass. So the trick here was just to create an alpha mask that made this texture or this mesh look like grass, basically using a noise texture that is stretched out in one axis, and then the underlying mesh, the underlying texture would just be a simple wood material, and then the mask would make it look like straws, grass straws that made up the roof. And basically that's what I set up. You can see here I'm just adjusting that mask to make the mesh look like straws, or yeah, to make it look like straws. And now I'm just adding that underlying material, and the mask would just cut into that, hence creating the grass texture like that, breaking it up like grass straws. And here I'm just adjusting the materials a bit, adding some noise textures to make it look a bit different in other areas, basically just adjusting the colors a bit like that to get it to look like how my references looked. Now the edges, because we're using they looked a bit too sharp, so I ended up using a brush to soften the edges a bit so that it doesn't look cut off as we had it before. And I think it ended up looking quite nicely. And the great thing about this, like I showed you previously, you can layer this up several times to make it look to make the grass look dense. Now after the texturing, all was left was just importing this PBR textures back into Blender, and yeah, and that's what I did here. Just going in to the different material sets and matching them to their respective materials. See, I did a little bit of layering to make the grass look thicker than it was, and yeah, and I only textured one side because I knew I could easily duplicate this side and move it to the opposite, to the back side, like you see. And again, I'm doing some layering to make the grass look thicker. The more thicker you want it, if you want it to look more thicker, you can just add add more layers of this, and just duplicating this, mirroring this on the opposite direction, so that we also have it on the back side, like that. Now at this point, we have the hardest part done. I can come back here. If you're using Eevee, you need to turn on screen space reflections to be able to see through the glass and see the curtains. Like I said, I wanted duplicates of this, so duplicates of the window. So I knew I wanted one to have curtains and another one to have curtains. You can see just duplicating these. When I exported this object to Substance Painter, I didn't add all the windows because I only needed 1 or 2 windows, and the rest can just use that version of the window. You can also see I duplicated the door to use it here. I just need to fit the window, the door frame like that, and I had a door. I didn't want the bedroom door to be glass, to have a glass window, yeah, for privacy, of course. This one had a glass window. So what I just did is I selected the object and gave it the wood material from the Substance Painter, and just adjusted my UVs so that they match up, so that we don't have a glass object, so that door doesn't have a glass window. Just simple ways to make variations in your model, like that. Okay, I think the cabin was done here. The next part was to handle the environment, grass, and everything else. So after this, I just added this into my asset library as a collection, so that I can keep this project with the cabin separate from the original, from the scene I was going to create. It makes it much easier for me to reuse the cabin if it's in a different project. So I added it to the library, and now it's time to create some grass. Of course, I got some reference images of the type of grass I wanted to use, and I used curves with a bevel depth to make some grass objects. There are a lot of add-ons you could use if you don't want to create grass yourself, including my own add-on, Quick Trees. It comes with a bit of grass, and I'm also going to add some of this grass into that library because I think I liked how this grass turned out. So yeah, if you want it, links are going to be in the description. And there are also other add-ons like the forestation add-on, and what else, botanical. All links are going to be in the description. These are going to be affiliate links, so that if you get them, they can help out the channel quite a bit. Yeah, so I wanted to test out how this bunch of grass would look instance. So I created a quick geometry nodes instance to see, just to make sure that I can visualize how this grass is going to look, and I think I liked how it was coming through. Just instancing it with and randomizing the scale and rotation a bit to see how that looks. I went on and searched how different grass was going to look because I needed to do some texturing and create a lot of variation in the grass. I also looked for wheat grass, which kind of I think looks quite interesting, so it's what I'm trying to do here. yeah, again just using curves and adjusting them to get the look I wanted. After I just convert them into a mesh and UV unwrap them, and yeah. For texturing the grass, I think I did that in Blender because it was very simple and I didn't bake the texture. So here we're creating the wheat grass. It has this the wheat itself. I think that's what I'm designing here. I have a few reference images on the second monitor. I forgot to add it on the main monitor here, but basically just creating a cube and rotating it, deleting one side and ending up with something like this, like a kite, and duplicating that into what would look like wheat. And then adding that to the curves, just rotating it and lining it up, and we have a wheat plant ready to use. Now, I've never really seen a wheat plantation, so maybe some of you might let me know in the comments if this looked like wheat or not. But I was looking at some reference images and I was satisfied with that. So yeah, there's also this type of grass that I normally see in a lot of renders and a lot of images. So I was trying to do that, but yeah, you see it in the final render how it looked. Maybe I'll pop up a reference image of what I was trying to create here in a moment so that you can see. The modeling part was almost done, and it was time to texture. I'm converting this to a mesh and then UV unwrapping them because we're going to use some gradients that work best for meshes and not very good for curves. So I'm just jumping right into setting up my scene. I've already imported in the carbin and done some sculpting. I think I forgot to record this area here, but it's basically just creating a plane and turning on Dyno Topo and brushing away to make the scene look like a terrain of some sort. And yeah, just setting up the materials, adjusting them a bit. I'm using my mounted material. I'm sure most of you who follow the channel, make sure to subscribe, by the way. You know the mountain I'm talking about. I'm just using that material. I set it up so that some faces have rock materials and others have the grass material. Here I'm creating the grass instancer and using geometry nodes. All these setups, I've done this several times that it has become muscle memory for me, and it's very simple to set up. You just use a distribute points on faces and then instance on points, and then start randomizing. I'm using the collection, the grass collection we created a few minutes ago, and using that here. Just again, I'm adding in a noise texture into the scale so that I get some randomization in the scale. As you can see here, the noise plugged into the scale of the instances makes the grass, I think, look super realistic, as it kind of scales it down in a way that you would find in nature, which I think makes it look even better. I wanted to randomize the rotation even further, so I added some random rotation. I think I'll be adding screenshots of the nodes for those who are not able to get the project files, but I can get them as a Blender my YouTube member or as a Patreon. But if you're not able, I'll just be adding screenshots of this on my Blender Everything website for you to check out. And I think I'll be also adding my PureRef screenshots for the references on Blender Everything as well, so that you can see the reference images that I was using. I added in some translucence because real grass has a bit of translucence, and adjusted the color to make it a bit dried because I was going for that sort of season. For a more dry season, and yeah, still adjusting the materials a bit. Now that I was happy with this bunch of grass, I just duplicated it around and instanced it, duplicated it around to make it seem like the entire place was full of grass without using a lot of grass particles or a lot of grass elements. And yeah, I moved this, I added room for a road by just moving the planes aside. So I wanted to add a road, but I knew from my reference images that the grass that was closer to the road was shorter. So I used a curve object. I'm going to show it in a bit here. I think I skipped ahead, but yeah, I used it to adjust the height of the grass using proximity. But here I'm adding some rocks from Megascans, and you can see they look a bit too bright, so I added some curves adjustments to make them a bit darker, and so they can match a bit with our environment. So don't just drop scanned models or models from different projects and I think they will look perfect. Make sure you add some curves adjustments to make them fit your scene better. Yeah, again, you can see I'm using this path here that I created to also create a road. I had doing texture painting, so I made sure that I have a curve, then I use an array and shrink wrap to guide the plane that was going to eventually become our road. And basically, because I really don't like texture painting, so this was the trick I used. I used an array on the plane and then made a curve to use it as a guide to deform the path that was going to be our road. And you can see it really fits. The shrink wrap helps it hug the ground correctly, and so it kind of becomes integrated, and you can see we already have that in here. But because it's a plane, it ends up looking like a cut right into the road. So I needed to blend the road with the grass a bit here. So I created a mask using UV textures and a transparency and a texture gradient to create a gradient like this that softens the edge of the plane. So I added some noise to kind of blend this a bit using color burn, I think. So you see what I'm doing here, just breaking up the road a bit using textures so that it can blend easily into the road. And because I'm using Eevee, I turned on alpha blending, and you can see how the road now becomes. So without doing any texture painting, I think this is the most effective or efficient way of making roads in Blender. It's much yeah, it makes the things much easier. And I knew that the grass closer to the road was supposed to be smaller, so I used a proximity node to get a mask for how close the grass particles were to the road. And you can see here I'm using that proximity, and it gives me that gradient mask. And I'm going to use it to scale the length or the height of the grass appropriately, so that the closer the grass is to the road, the shorter it becomes. And because you need to capture. Basically, I've done several tutorials, and I think I'll do a better tutorial explaining this process a bit, because I wanted to keep this very short. I'm not going to explain everything I did here, but you can see now the grass closer to the road is shorter, and I'm just adding more adjustments using a car ramp, so that I have more control over how that blending happens. As you can see now that I've achieved that, I think. Continuing to adjust a few parameters here. Nothing new, just revisiting the old nodes that I was using, adjusting how the texture mapping is working for the noise texture that I added into the grass, adjusting the proximity until I get something I was happy with. So this is how the render looks in cycles. I also added a switch node because I knew for some grass I didn't want to adjust its length according to how close it is to the plane, like this middle grass. I didn't want it to be affected by how close it is to the road, so I added a switch node to switch that off, and I also added another node into the gradient so that I can make the where the tires of a car would run more rocky, and where the middle of the road a bit green, just to add the trail path of a path in the road itself, like that. I think it came out looking nice if you look at the final render. Then it was time to add in these wheat and more taller grass. So again, for this I just used the same instance I've created. I just duplicated it and just switched the collection from the short grass to the tall grass, and you can already see how that looked. I needed to adjust the colors a bit to make it look as dead or more dried up. Yeah, something like that was good. I adjusted the density and the height. And now it was time to add in some trees. I'm using my quick trees add-on to add the trees. So if you have it, you can be guaranteed that you'll be able to do this without needing any extra add-ons. So yeah, also adjusted the environment lighting, and then got this tall tree, added it into a collection. And again, since I already set up an instancer for the grass, I use the same instancer for the trees. You can see here. And yeah, adding this forest really that's when things started to look really good, I think. It's just about adjusting the lighting. I also added in some rocks to make the road a little bit detailed, because previously we were just using a texture to imply a rock surface, but I added in some actual rocks in there. And again, I needed to do a curves adjustment to make the rock look realistic. You can see our road is quite procedural, that we can adjust it to however we want. If you're using texture painting, it would take a lot of time to make adjustments like this on the fly. So added in some rocks. Same for the grass, because I was just using a plane, it was easy for me to make adjustments on the go, which is usually hard if you're using texture painting. And I really like how the grass looked, just adjusting it a bit and putting everything into a collection, because at this point the project became a bit slow, so I had to group things a bit so that I can work at different things while I hide everything else, so that my setup doesn't end up being too slow. I'm starting to work on the animation, adding in the trees to make sure that the camera is not clipping into any trees, turning them off to see the camera speed, because if you have a lot of polygons, you won't really get a proper feel of how fast the camera is moving, because the scene is going to be too lagging. I also wanted a good shot of the road, so I added that camera drone shot, and I also wanted to show off the cabin, because we did a lot of work on it, so you have to show it off. I'll be using this cabin quite a lot, so you can expect it, and I will be making more cabins, more stuff. Yeah, all the project files are going to be in the description again. But this was the shirt. Yeah, he was just calculating how long it was going to take me to render this out, because I was rendering each frame at 1 minute per frame. I think, yeah, 1 minute per frame. So I was rendering about 400 frames. So it took me, I think, 6 hours to render the entire frame. That's what I was calculating there, how long it would take me to render these. It's something that I consider a lot, because you don't want to work on a project that you can't really render out. What would be the point, really, if you... So yeah, you can see I had some trees clipping in here. I had to adjust the camera a bit. And I think with that we were done. The next thing was rendering, and then the final results are here. And yeah, so thank you again. Project files are going to be in the description, and everything else. Yeah, thank you.